Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're taking a deep dive into something a little different, a little unexpected. We're diving into the world of John Milton, but not the Paradise Lost everyone knows.
You mean the sequel?
Exactly. Paradise Regained. It doesn't get nearly as much attention as its famous predecessor. You guys sent in some awesome YouTube videos analyzing both poems, and, well, the premise alone is just so intriguing.
It is.
Imagine, right? Satan and Jesus going head-to-head, well, more like word to word, during those 40 days in the wilderness. What could the devil possibly say to tempt the Son of God?
Right. It's like, where do you even begin?
Exactly. This is not your typical Sunday school stuff.
Definitely not.
Okay, so for anyone who needs a quick refresher, in Paradise Lost, we see Satan's fall from heaven.
Right. The whole rebellion, the temptation of Adam and Eve, the whole shebang.
And ultimately, their expulsion from the Garden of Eden. Paradise Regained picks up right where Paradise Lost left off, focusing on that biblical story of Jesus in the wilderness, fasting for 40 days, being tempted by the devil.
And here's the thing. Right from the start, Satan's in a bind. He knows who Jesus is. He knows he's the Messiah.
And that this is basically the beginning of the end for him.
Pretty much, yeah. The poem even makes it clear that a straight-up fight is out of the question. Satan he can't defeat the Son of God in a physical battle.
So what's a devil to do?
Well, he goes for the psychological approach.
Easy.
Temptation.
So it's like a cosmic chess match, but Satan's playing with like half a set of pieces.
Exactly. He's got to get creative. So first, he appears to Jesus disguised as an old man. Very unassuming.
I'm trying to pull a fast one.
And his opening move. He targets a basic human need, hunger. Hey, Jesus, he says, essentially, you've got all this divine power. Just turn these stones into bread.
Smart, right. Go for that primal instinct.
But Jesus isn't having it. He throws some serious biblical knowledge back at Satan, reminding him of guys like Elijah and the Moses, who also fasted in the wilderness.
So round one goes to Jesus.
Definitely. He establishes right away that he's not going to be swayed by simple tricks or promises of comfort. His faith is unshakable.
But Satan, of course, doesn't give up that easily. He drops the disguise. Things start escalating pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah, it gets intense. Instead of basic needs, he starts dangling things like riches and power in front of Jesus.
Like straight-up worldly power.
Oh, yeah. Even offers him the chance to liberate the Israelites from Roman rule.
Whoa, playing the political card?
Exactly. And what's so fascinating here is how these temptations aren't just random acts of evil.
They're strategically chosen, right?
Oh, absolutely. Each one represents a virtue that Satan is twisting to his own ends.
Like offering Jesus the ability to feed the hungry, that's a warped version of charity.
Right. Suggesting he free the Israelites, that's a twisted form of hope.
So it's not just tempting Jesus with bad things, it's tempting him with good things, but for all the wrong reasons.
Exactly. And it makes you think, what's more dangerous? Resisting blatant evil? Or recognizing when good intentions are being manipulated?
Oh, that's a good one.
And this goes beyond the poem itself, raises a question for us. How often do we fall for those kinds of twisted temptations in our own lives?
Oh, I know I have, for sure.
Right. Do we always examine the motivations behind our desires, even the ones that seem good on the surface?
That's deep, man.
Yeah.
But going back to the poem, Jesus isn't just resisting these temptations. He's shutting them down systematically. Like, he's got a counter-argument for everything.
He's totally unfazed.
Yeah.
And you can practically feel Satan's frustration growing with every failed attempt.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, this isn't like tempting Eve.
Right. Jesus is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
It's not just about him being divine. It's about his character. He's completely unwavering in his commitment to his Father's plan.
Which is, in itself, tempting to the devil.
Absolutely.
Now, let's get to the moment where things really get interesting. Satan pulls out all the stops, makes this grand, desperate offer. He says, "Fall down and worship me, and the whole world will be yours." Talk about a power move.
Yeah.
And it's a direct parallel to Satan's own fall from grace, right? When he tried to be like God.
Oh, absolutely. It's like this twisted echo of his own rebellion. And what's so fascinating is that it's not about actions or miracles.
It's about getting Jesus to
betray his very nature. To abandon his mission, to choose power over purpose.
And it all circles back to those core themes from Paradise Lost.
Yeah, the dangers of pride, the desire for control, the illusion of power.
And it's a reminder that these temptations aren't just ancient stories, they're very real. They're present in our own lives. We face them all the time.
So, we've established that Jesus isn't taking the bait. He's not giving in to any of these temptations. And Satan's getting, pretty frustrated. But, Paradise Regained, it doesn't have that that epic scale that Paradise Lost has.
Yeah, it's true. Paradise Lost had these huge battles and sweeping speeches. It was, I don't know, almost operatic in its scope. Paradise Regained, it feels much more like contained, almost intimate.
Right. It's like Paradise Lost sets this grand stage, establishes the fall of both Satan and humanity. And then Paradise Regained zooms in on this personal, almost psychological dimension of redemption.
So it's less about those external conflicts and more about the internal struggle between good and evil, the one that we all experience.
Precisely. It's exploring how temptation works on a personal level, even for the Son of God.
Which brings us back to this interesting point, about how Jesus is portrayed. Because in Paradise Lost, he's this powerful, almost mythical figure. He's casting Satan out of heaven, destined to, conquer evil. But in Paradise Regained, well, he's not quite as exciting.
Yeah, that's a common critique.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people say that Jesus comes across as too perfect in Paradise Regained, too unwavering.
Right. Where's the drama? There's no real inner turmoil. He just shuts down all these temptations with biblical quotes.
And some people even suggest that Milton might have been influenced by the clergy of his time.
Yeah.
That they were pushing for this more simplified, literal interpretation of religious texts.
But does that make for a good story? I mean, can we really relate to a character who never seems to struggle?
It's a tricky balance, right? You want to portray the divine nature of Christ, but you also want to create a character that feels human, relatable, someone whose struggles we can understand.
I think that's where Milton's use of blank verse comes into play because, blank verse is typically reserved for plays and dramatic works. So by choosing this form, Milton is hinting at that internal struggle, even when Jesus doesn't explicitly voice it.
That's a great point. It's like the language itself becomes the battleground for those internal conflicts.
Exactly. So Milton's word choices, his allusions to classical literature, even the structure of the verse itself, all of these elements work together to create that sense of tension, of drama, even within this, seemingly simple dialogue.
And that's in stark contrast to Paradise Lost, where Milton uses these grand, sweeping images, these dramatic monologues to convey the emotional turmoil of his characters. In Paradise Regained, it's much quieter, the drama is more subtle, but no less potent.
It makes you wonder if that was a deliberate choice on Milton's part. Maybe he was trying to highlight the contrast between human weakness, as seen in Paradise Lost, and divine resilience, as seen in Paradise Regained.
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation. It's almost like a cosmic role reversal, where humanity falters and divinity prevails. But instead of focusing on those external battles, Milton is diving deep into that internal conflict, demonstrating how true strength lies in resisting temptation, even when it's disguised as something good, something virtuous.
Which, connects back to what you were saying earlier about Satan's frustration. I mean, he's used to dealing with flawed humans, people who are easily swayed. But Jesus is a completely different opponent. He's unyielding, unwavering. It's like he's operating on a completely different spiritual plane.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another fascinating aspect of Paradise Lost that often gets overlooked, the war in heaven. It's more than just a backdrop to Satan's fall. It provides this crucial context for understanding his character, his motivations in Paradise Regained.
Yeah, one of those YouTube videos we were looking at mentioned how Paradise Lost is almost a retelling of this war in heaven. What's that all about?
So Milton takes this brief biblical allusion to this conflict between, the angels, and he expands it into this full-blown epic battle.
Like a celestial Trojan War.
Exactly. Warring factions, heroic deeds, and ultimately a tragic fall from grace. And at the center of it all is Satan, right? Leading those rebel angels who are challenging God's authority.
It's like a prequel, showing us how the devil became the devil.
Yeah, we see his pride, his ambition, his, cunning, but also this deep-seated sense of injustice that fuels his rebellion. And it's this wounded pride that really motivates him in Paradise Regained.
So it's not just about challenging God, it's about rejecting the whole system. Maybe he saw heaven as inherently unfair, something that was limiting his potential.
It's like his rebellion was less about evil and more about this desperate attempt to redefine his own place in the cosmic order.
Okay, so how does Milton actually depict this war in heaven? Is it just a straightforward good versus evil clash?
It's much more nuanced than that. Milton uses these incredibly vivid images, drawing on both classical and biblical sources to create a battle that's both epic and psychologically complex. One of the most striking images is of Satan, riding in this chariot, surrounded by his legions, challenging the forces of heaven. It's his perfect embodiment of, both his military might and his inflated sense of self-importance.
Wow, I can picture that. It's almost cinematic.
And that's part of Milton's genius. He takes these abstract theological concepts and makes them visceral, relatable.
Well, so we've got Satan in his chariot leading the rebel angels. Who's on the other side? Who's leading God's forces?
Well, in Paradise Lost, it's God the Son, who, of course, later becomes incarnate as Jesus. And that's where the connection to Paradise Regained gets even stronger. We're seeing the same character, but in different roles, at different points in this vast cosmic timeline.
So it's like in Paradise Lost, Jesus is this divine warrior leading the armies of heaven. But in Paradise Regained, he's more of a philosopher, a teacher, using wisdom and scripture to resist temptation. It's a fascinating juxtaposition.
It's like it reinforces this idea that Christ possesses both strength and compassion. He's a warrior who can conquer evil, but he's also this wise teacher who understands the subtleties of temptation, the importance of inner resilience.
Yeah, it adds a whole new layer to both poems, like they're in conversation with each other across time and space, exploring different facets of the same cosmic drama.
Exactly. They're two parts of this larger narrative, highlighting that complex relationship between humanity and divinity, and that ongoing struggle between good and evil.
Now, back to the war in heaven, does good ultimately triumph over evil, like in Paradise Regained?
It does. But it's not a simple victory. Milton describes this fierce battle, heavy losses on both sides. But ultimately, God the Father intervenes and sends his Son to deliver the final blow against Satan and his rebellious legions.
Okay, so it sounds like it was pretty intense. But one thing that really struck me, especially after listening to some of these YouTube analyses, is this idea that Satan's motivations are more complicated than just pure evil. It's like he's driven by this existential despair, this profound sense of hopelessness in the face of God's absolute power.
Right, and that makes him a much more tragic figure. He's not just a villain twirling his mustache. He's this fallen angel who has lost his place in the divine order. He's struggling to find meaning, purpose, in a world where free will seems incompatible with God's omnipotence.
So it's not just that he's rebelling against God's authority. He's rebelling against the very reality of that authority, the limitations it places on his own freedom. And that frustration, that sense of being trapped, is what drives his actions in both Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained.
You've got it. And that's what makes Milton's work so relevant. He's not just writing about angels and devils. He's exploring the human condition. Those universal struggles with temptation, doubt, free will, the search for meaning in a world that often feels predetermined.
And it makes you realize that those epic battles in Paradise Lost, those grand pronouncements, they're not just about cosmic forces clashing. They're metaphors for the internal struggles we all face. The battle between good and evil, faith and doubt, surrender and rebellion. Those battles are being fought within each of us every single day.
And maybe Paradise Regained, with its focus on internal struggle, on quiet resilience, offers us a more relatable, more applicable model for navigating those personal battles.
That's a powerful thought. Maybe true paradise isn't about winning wars or achieving these external victories. Maybe it's about finding that inner peace, that alignment with our values that allows us to stand firm against temptation, even when it comes disguised as something good.
That's beautifully put. And it leads us perfectly into the final section of our deep dive. How do we apply these lessons from Paradise Regained to our own lives? What does it mean to regain paradise in a personal, even spiritual sense?
So we've covered a lot of ground here, epic battles, internal struggles, the complexities of good and evil. But what does it all mean for us? Like, what can we actually take away from Paradise Regained and apply to our own lives?
That's the real question, isn't it? I mean, it's easy to get caught up in all the epic stuff, but the real power of these poems is how they make us think about our own choices. The battles we face, not with like literal devils, but with ourselves.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too when we were talking about, Satan's attempts to tempt Jesus and how none of those temptations were inherently evil.
Right.
Like food, power, the desire to help people. These are all things that, most of us want.
Exactly. It's the motivation behind them that matters. And Satan, he twisted those desires. He appealed to pride, to ego, to the promise of a shortcut.
Right. Like he wanted Jesus to to compromise, to
Act out of character, exactly, to betray his true nature and his mission.
And that's what I find so interesting,
Mm.
because if you connect that to our own lives, it makes you think about all the ways we're tempted to compromise our values too. Take the easy way out, even when we know it's not the right thing to do.
It's almost like the obvious temptations, the blatant vices, those are easier to resist.
Yeah.
It's the subtle ones, the ones that are disguised as good intentions, or rationalized through clever arguments. Those are the ones that are really dangerous.
Yeah, like how often do we justify a decision, even a bad one, by saying, oh, but I'm helping someone, or it's just this once. We all have those moments where we're tempted to bend our own rules.
Right. And that's where discernment comes in. Paradise Regained isn't saying that we should all become hermits and shun all worldly desires. It's about, examining our motivations, being aware of the subtle ways temptation can creep in, even when it looks, appealing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not about saying no to everything. It's about asking yourself, why am I saying yes?
Yeah.
Is it for the right reasons? Or am I letting my ego or my fears cloud my judgment?
And I think that's where Milton's portrayal of Satan's frustration is so insightful. Because here's this master tempter, right? And he's completely thrown off by Jesus' resilience.
Yeah.
He just doesn't understand why his tactics aren't working.
It's like you can almost picture him throwing a tantrum in the wilderness. Like, why isn't this working? But it makes you think, if Satan's greatest weapon is tempting us to act out of character, then what does that say about knowing ourselves? About staying true to who we are?
Absolutely. The stronger our foundation, the more grounded we are in our values and our purpose, the less susceptible we are to those insidious temptations. It's like a spiritual immune system, right?
Oh, I like that.
The stronger our sense of self, the more resistant we are to those influences that try to pull us off course.
So maybe paradise isn't a place. Maybe it's a state of being. A state of alignment where our actions and our choices reflect our deepest values. And that takes work. It takes awareness. And it takes, the willingness to challenge those impulses that try to lead us astray.
And this idea of a personal paradise, it ties into Milton's theological arguments too. He was writing during a time of intense religious and political upheaval. And Paradise Regained was, in part, a response to those who saw the world as irredeemably fallen.
So he's saying that paradise can be regained, not in some far off future, but right here, right now.
Yes. He's suggesting that true victory over evil isn't about, vanquishing some external force. It's about conquering those internal temptations that lead us away from God's will.
Right. And that message, I feel like it resonates even more today. In a world where we're constantly bombarded with messages telling us who we should be, what we should want, how we should achieve it.
Yeah.
It's a call to, resist those external pressures and focus on cultivating that inner strength, that moral compass that allows us to navigate those tricky, ethical gray areas.
It makes you wonder, though, what would a modern day Paradise Regained look like? Would Satan tempt us with social media fame? The allure of instant gratification, the pressure to, conform to societal expectations.
Right. It's like the battlefield has shifted from the wilderness to the digital landscape, but the core struggle, it's still the same.
It's still about, discerning right from wrong, resisting those temptations that appeal to our insecurities and desires, and ultimately, choosing to act in accordance with our true selves.
Yeah.
Even when it's the harder path.
So if we had to distill this whole deep dive into one takeaway, what would it be?
I think it would be this. Paradise Regained is a reminder that the most important battles aren't fought, on these grand external stages. They're fought within ourselves. In the quiet confines of our own hearts and minds. It's a call to cultivate that inner strength, that unwavering commitment to our values that allows us to resist those subtle temptations that try to pull us off course.
Beautifully said. And for you guys listening, I think the challenge is, how do you define your paradise? What values are going to guide you? And how are you going to resist those temptations, big and small, that try to make you act out of character? It's something to think about as you navigate your own journey.
And remember, just as Jesus found strength in Scripture and faith, you can find strength in those principles and beliefs that give your life meaning and purpose.
That's it for this deep dive into Paradise Regained. We'll be back soon with another fascinating exploration, so stay tuned.